I was told to consider when speaking about something technical to convey it in a way that my grandparents or someone non-technical could understand. I know when it comes to giving software demos, there's inherently a level of refinement and sophistication when conveying information to one's audience. I mean, it's software. But would you say there are other parts of the demo where one should convey information as if they were speaking to a 5 or 9-year-old? And the second part was if there were a ratio of speaking technical to speaking to a child's understanding, what would that ratio look like?
So this is a very, very interesting topic and can put people at great risk. You've got to map to your audience. You've got to map to individual job titles in your audience. So, for example, let's say we were talking about chemistry a moment ago. Imagine you're in a room with some chemists, some biologists, and some IT people, okay? So you've got 3 different distinct languages. And your job in pre-sales is to be sufficiently conversant with all 3 languages to be credible and perceived as credible and trustworthy. Now, that being said, when you're communicating ideas from one language, if you will, to another, as opposed to talking down, what I would recommend is to use analogies and metaphors and stories, which we might come to later in this as well. So, for example, when you're talking about chemistry, a great analogy, and the chemists in the audience are going to scream at me for this, but is cooking, because cooking is chemistry very fundamentally. And so if you're trying to explain chemistry to somebody in IT, you could use cooking in a restaurant or at home or at a convention as different analogies for different scales, if you will, of cooking for different types of chemistries or type chemistry production, whether or not you're doing something for milligrams or you're doing something in the tens of grams, or you're doing something on a production scale of vaccines for COVID, for example. So talking down, I think, is risky, particularly when you're talking to other people that are technologically strong in their disciplines. Does that help?
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. You just said before the audience, and I mean, it makes sense. Of course, if one were to work at a biotech company and they're trying to sell to that kind of customer, of course, you'll have the biologist there, maybe the chemist, an IT person. But have you seen such a disparate like a hodgepodge of so many personas before in a demo? And I mean, I could only imagine with a biotech company, but have you seen have you been on any demos or heard of any demos where there was just so many different personas that were even far off ledge that someone
all the time? Let's go back to our example of a CRM system. So if you just begin to brainstorm, let's say that the possible job titles that could be users or contributors to a CRM system, it could include salespeople, frontline sales managers, senior sales management, pre-sales, sales operations, marketing from the lead gen side, marketing from campaign management side, and the list goes on. I mean, you could easily have 10 or more significant job titles, all of whom have different perspectives of both what they want out of the system and what the system offers to them. Does that resonate?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the title of your book rings a bell. It's a trademark, or it's definitely like the I wish if you could correct me on that, but it's like the thing that just comes off your when you think of tissues, you'll call it Kleenex. For a while, Spanish people would call gum chiclets.
That's right.
So, yeah. So when you said that just before, the person who's able to just win the whole room, I call them the great demo, the great connector, but the great demonstrator. And that sounds almost like a Denzel Washington movie, The Great Debater. But
there you go, going back to the best actors.
Jay, you think you can do this to me? I'm the man up in this piece.
Yeah, and so terrific demonstrators will then partition the audience by job title. And produce and deliver demo segments that are mapped to each of those individual job titles accordingly. So the example we were just talking about with CRM system, if you're presenting to the head of sales wants to see the forecast, the pipeline, be able to drill down, see which deals are solid, which ones are not, where do I need to coach my team, okay? Frontline sales managers wants the same thing, but at a detailed level, one level deeper. Frontline salespeople, all they want is to be able to put in the minimum amount of information that's required to progress the opportunity, and otherwise they want it to get out of their way. Marketing people don't really care about any of that. What they're interested in is, how do I track what's going on in terms of lead gen and justifying the marketing spend? How do I manage campaigns? They're totally different perspectives. Yeah. So does that help answer?
Yeah, it does. That's great. And I could only fathom, being on a call, a demo where you have so many different personas from within the circle of concern and then outside of the circle of concern, and then being that great influencer, demonstrator to really be able to speak to each individual needs. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, the traditional approach had been to have a long linear demo that from time to time is supposed to embrace the interests and needs of the various players. But what that ends up as is known as the spaghetti demo. And if you think about a huge bowl of spaghetti, no sauce, just the spaghetti noodles, and it's sat for a while, what happens when you try to pull out one strand?
If you put it for a while, I think if you try to pull the strand, it's going to rip, right?
It's going to rip, or you're going to end up with this huge clump. It's just a mess. And that's exactly what happens in these traditional demos. It's a mess. You hear people saying things, okay, now I'm a marketing campaigner, okay, now I'm a salesperson, okay, now I'm in sales operations, and the audience's brain's just swirling around going, I have no idea where this is anymore. So the concepts we teach in Great Demo are break it up into consumable chunks so that you're not trying to take a big wad of spaghetti and try to pick it apart, but rather have it partitioned, pre-partitioned for those individual job titles. And you effectively are building small individual demos based on their specific needs and interests, completing them before you move on to your next.
The Tony Moze Podcast.